morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. We will say MSCA today. And we are delighted to have speakers from Canada, Europe, and US today. The event is co-organized with Western University, Postdoctoral Services in Canada, and many thanks for their support and collaboration. My name is Derya Büyüktanır-Karacan, and my colleague Jackson Howard and I are based in Washington, D.C., and we are serving as the two regional coordinators of EURAXESS North America. I'm also a researcher and an adjunct professor at George Washington University. So today our speakers will share information about opportunities on MSCA grants, focusing on the postdoctoral fellowships, we will also say PF. And this mobility scheme targets researchers holding a PhD who wish to carry out their research activities abroad, acquire new skills, and develop their careers. PFs help researchers gain experience on their countries, in other countries, disciplines, and non-academic sectors. As you may all know, this is a very prestigious grant, and we are going to talk about how Canada and US are also leading as the countries who are getting the most grants for these funding schemes. So after our introductory remarks by Western University Mihaela, thank you Mihaela, and Marie Curie Alumni Association North America Chapter Sabina Sevicek, thank you Sabina, and we will listen to tips and tricks from an upcoming MSCA Global Fellow, FIWOS, thank you, from Western University in Canada, and then we will learn the details, all the details about MSCA from Chavi Ekaut. Hi, Chavi. And he will focus on postdoctoral fellowships, and you will learn all the details, hopefully. If you have questions, of course, at the end of the session, we will have the Q&A session, but I just want to remind you that please don't put your questions on the chat box, but send the questions via the Q&A box, not the chat box. So the webinar and the presentation will be recorded and shared afterwards. We will also send you a post-event email so that you are just going to get every presentation. So before I start, I would like to present a brief information about EURAXESS North America, about EURAXESS, and not only EURAXESS North America, but also EURAXESS for those who are not familiar with us before. So EURAXESS is an initiative to promote Europe as a research destination and strengthen collaboration between researchers in Europe and around the world. As EURAXESS North America, we are one of the 9 hubs all over the world. My colleague Jackson Howard, now he's drinking his coffee, and I represent North America, and we are based in Washington, D.C. And we cover the United States and Canada. And on the other side of EURAXESS projects, you have representatives in the EU member states and associated countries to the Horizon Europe, providing country-specific support and expertise to help you move to or collaborate with. So I just want to mention that we are not only focusing EU member states, but also the associated countries to Horizon Europe. So our main primary mandate is to inform researchers about Horizon Europe, which is the EU's 7-year framework program for research and innovation, running from 2001 to 2027. MSCA grants fall under Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe, which is bottom-up funding for all fields with no predetermined topics. So it also gives you a great opportunity that you're not limited with some of the calls or topics that's mentioned before. So EURAXESS is the best source, as Chavi probably will share with us, to reach out all these MSCA hosting offers. And I want to go with Mihaela Harmos, which we collaborated during this event from the very beginning. So the floor is yours, Mihaela.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Greetings from London, Ontario, Canada. My name is Mihaela Harmos, and I have been managing the postdoctoral studies at Western University for more than 14 years. I'm also a certified immigration consultant, so if you have any questions about immigration, please forward them to us. And I'm also the co-founder of the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Administrators. I'd like to welcome each one of you and thank our colleagues from EURAXESS for making this webinar happen. Thank you, Jackson and Daria. We're all very familiar with this fellowship program, but I know that we're going to have a chance to hear about this year's competition from a panel of experts and alumni, but I just wanted to share a few key messages with you. To all our Canadian trainees, please consider connecting with the globe through this program and expand your expertise through advanced training, international, interdisciplinary, and cross-sector mobility. These fellowships foster the creative and innovative capacities of you, PhD holders, aiming to expand your expertise globally. Please reach out for support and guidance. We're here to support you. To all European trainees on call, please consider Canada as one of your top destinations. Canada offers postdoctoral scholars world-class research facilities, comprehensive support systems, all within a safe, inclusive, and multicultural society. With a high quality of life, stunning natural beauty, Canada provides an ideal environment for professional growth, interdisciplinary collaboration, and personal well-being, making it a top destination for advancing research careers. Please ensure that your research teams reach out to our institutions when trying to identify potential researchers in your own field, and also for support while preparing and finalizing the applications. Most of the institutions in Canada will have an internal deadline in place for endorsement, usually a month prior to the program application deadline, which I think is September 10. Just to give you an example, at Western University, the internal deadline is August 27 for institutional approvals. Now, a little bit about us. Western University is one of the top 10 research-intensive universities in Canada. We have housed numerous MSc fellows on our campus, and we are very proud of you. At Western, our institutional research program officer can provide additional information, answers all your questions. So please, after the call is launched, please reach out to us for support. I know you probably have a lot of questions about immigration and taxation. Happy to answer them. Just overview, individuals resident in Canada are subject to Canadian income tax on worldwide income. Relief from double taxation is provided through Canadians' international tax treaties, as well as via foreign tax credits and deductions for foreign taxes paid on income derived from non-Canadian sources. But we could provide with more information. Western's commitment to excellence and innovation across diverse fields makes it a top destination for advancing your research. You can have access to skill building workshops, leadership training to enhance your career prospects and professional growth. We also collaborate with industry partners, and that will lead to practical applications of your research and increase your impact and relevance of your work. We offer a mentorship program to all our postdoctoral scholars, and also a 360-degree support starting with the onboarding. As a certified immigration consultant, probably at our institution, I'll be the one supporting your work permits. It is an easy process, so don't be afraid. Don't feel like that will not ensure a smooth transition. Please reach out to me directly for any follow-up questions. Enjoy the rest of the presentation. We're looking forward to host you as a postdoctoral scholar through this program. And good luck with your application if you apply this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what you offer is really valuable because the researchers will really understand when they start this process, and hopefully afterwards they get this, grants. Another, process just starts, and they need really a good help. I mean, and these are so important because I was also a postdoc, researchers. I came from Turkey to the US, and you definitely need from the very beginning till the end of your fellowships, you need the support systems. So EURAXESS is just one part, but in the local way, I think you provide a lot of information for the postdoctoral fellows, right? So thank you so much, Miela. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Sabina Sevicek, the Marie Curie Alumni Association North America Chapter Chair and Global Fellow in Chicago. So Sabina, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Daria, for introducing me. Thanks, Jackson and Michaela, for putting this together. And it is my great pleasure to be here with you in two roles as chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association North America chapter, but also as a current MSCA Global Postdoctoral Fellow at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. Before returning, I'm here during my outgoing phase before returning to my beneficiary, which is the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna, Austria. And today, as Daria already mentioned, we all need support during our postdoctoral fellowships, but also afterwards. So there is never-ending need of support. And as an MSCA fellow, you will actually be able to gain this access to a wonderful network which the Marie Curie Alumni Association provides for life. And just shortly, what does that mean? The Marie Curie Alumni Association was funded in 2012. Like the fellowship, it is named after the Marie Skłodowska-Curie, who was a Polish-French physicist and the only person who has won 2 Nobel Prizes so far. The membership in our network is free and it is open to any past or present beneficiary of the European Commission's MSCA program. It is a funding and support for the MCA members, and it is provided by the European Commission Directorate General for Education and Culture. And today the network consists of more than 22,000 members across the globe. And as I already mentioned, it provides a lifetime opportunities, including regardless of your career path, stage, location, and research field. As I have mentioned, more than 20,000 members are based in are from 155 nationalities, from all kind of sciences, as you can see, from engineering to social sciences, and representative of all age groups. We provide as a network, we have our own member directory through which we communicate with our members, and we conduct the surveys, plan the events, organize support and training events, provide also micro grants, which can be used for career development and travels, but also the awards, which are awarded on a yearly basis to recognize the efforts and achievements of our members. Now, the mission of the MCA is to bring together the MSCA community, support the career developments of past and present MSCA beneficiaries at all career stages, and to be a voice for research across regions and disciplines. So I just want to mention the 3 main pillars of the MCA, which really stands on networking, meaning connecting the MSCA community. The second one being the career development for all the MCA members. And the third one, providing kind of a channel for science diplomacy and foster advocacy for researchers. The MCA as an organization, is kind of organized into 3 parts. It consists of the MCA board, as put here on the slide, with 10 board members. And then we are organized in regional chapters, of which North America is just one of them. And North America chapter is for both researchers based in Canada and the US, but also those who have the Canadian or US nationality and wish to be connected with the chapter. So it's not just exclusive based on where someone resides at the moment. And apart from the regional chapters, we have MCA working groups, which could be career development, policy, communication, etc. And every member can take part in any working groups that they are interested in. We have also our own website where you can follow us, and the LinkedIn page, which is convenient for everyone, not only for the members of our community. And please feel free to reach out with any of your questions to our email provided here. And I believe Jackson will post those links also in the chat. Thank you, Jackson. Just to highlight one of the recent activities that we organized, this is a Round the World webinar series. We have organized in September last year, the power of networking for scientists. And our next webinar will be, which is accessible for everyone, not just for our members. And our next webinar will be on slow science on 9th of May. And on the right side, there are just few pictures from our in-person meeting in Chicago above and below, with the board in Boston, with our previous chapter chair, Irina Mikhailova. And our biggest event is the MCA Annual Conference and General Assembly, which took place last week in March and connected around 300 members that connected at the MCA. And above here is just some of the members from North America chapter that have participated in this event. It was a wonderful, as Daria already mentioned, post-COVID, I think people appreciate to meet in person much more. And these are the meaningful connections that one can build, either planning a new research network, connecting with scientists across disciplines, and planning new application for funding. Now, this is all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. Please feel free to reach out to me or to the chapter. We'll be happy to help you and assist you as wherever we can, and welcome to get in touch anytime. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sabina. And what I can say is that what you're doing is so important, because we also understood the importance of networking, science communication, science diplomacy. And this is after you got these grants and, and afterwards, you need to go on this collaboration, because without this collaboration, I think we cannot really have the real interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach in science. So, and what you do is you're really trying to team up these researchers again, right? You connect them and within these trainings or networking events. So thank you so much, and hopefully more members will join you, and you are gonna have bigger effects in science communication as well. And some of our friends were also in Poland, as representing EURAXESS, because we also support these fellowships a lot in all over the world. Our hubs in China, India, Latin America, Japan, South Korea. So everywhere we try to connect these MSCA fellows as well as alumni. So now I would like to have Fivos Phylaktou as our speaker. It is so important for us because we are going to have tips and tricks for the researchers who are thinking to apply these fellowships. But normally in the events, we invite at the end of the info sessions about MSCA, but unfortunately today, because of some conflicts in his agenda, we are hosting you a bit earlier. But this time, what we are going to do is we can take your questions after his presentation, so that he might not stay at the end of the webinar. So Fivos, the floor is yours, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, and sorry for the agenda mix-up. Just a quick confirmation that you can see my screen properly.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so it's lovely to be here today. My plan is to tell you very briefly about my story and share my 2 cents for a successful Marie Curie application. My name is Fivos, and basically my life revolves around bringing people in the lab and zapping the brains with magnetic pulses in an effort to understand how the brain works. I come from a tiny island in the Mediterranean Sea called Cyprus, which is right here. This is where I grew up, and this is where I studied and got my degree in psychology from Frederick University in 2019. And I then joined the Cyprus University of Technology, where I obtained my PhD in June 2023. In September 2023, at the age of 28, I decided to restart my life and moved to the other side of the world. Today, I think I live somewhere around here, probably. Here in Canada, I'm a postdoc at Western University and at the Gray Center for Mobility and Activity. In a few months, I will be moving once again further west to join the University of Nevada, Reno, as part of my outgoing phase of the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship, which is going to start in September 2025. So why am I here today? I guess the reason I'm talking to you right now is because my Marie Curie proposal, which was submitted in 2023, was successful. Now, I'm not going to bore you with any of the details of the project, but for those of you who are curious, you can find this information in the Cordis portal. For the outgoing phase of this project, as I mentioned, I will be spending my first 2 years at the University of Nevada, Reno in the United States, followed by a year in Cyprus and the Cyprus University of Technology for the return phase. Now, if you were closely following the story up to now, you might feel a bit confused or start to realize that the puzzle doesn't really fit together. You might be thinking, if you applied in 2023 for the United States and Cyprus, what are you doing in Canada right now? Which brings me to my first piece of advice. One thing I've seen a lot with peers is that a lot of early career researchers prioritize the Marie Curie as their next and only career option, with everything else serving as a plan B. Now, I didn't know how to illustrate plan B, so here's just a picture of my cat. However, regarding this prioritization, my view is that this is not the most appropriate approach, and instead, or at least what I did, is to view the Marie Curie as the plan B. Now, that is not to say that you shouldn't treat the Marie Curie as unimportant or not prioritize any effort to it. But what I do mean is that you should avoid putting all your eggs in one basket. In other words, considering its competitiveness, try not to rely solely on the Marie Curie. For example, my mindset during the time of application was to apply in an attempt to receive feedback on my first proposal so that I can improve it and reapply the following year and the year after, and so on, until I get a successful application. So due to this approach, I was also actively looking for other postdoctoral opportunities, including the one that I currently hold. Given that the Marie Curie can be postponed, I decided not to terminate my current contract, which explains my current Canada situation. The next tip that I want to share is again something that I've seen amongst some of my peers. A few people tend to reverse engineer the application and proposal thought process. The Marie Curie has a mobility requirement, meaning that you need to move outside of your current hosting institution and take your research somewhere new. A lot of applicants view this as an opportunity to go to a specific place they want and then attempt to tailor their proposal based on where they want to go. Personally, I believe that this approach does not help you build a strong proposal. To have a strong proposal, you need a solid idea that has the appropriate people and the appropriate infrastructure to support it. What worked for me was to think of my work and all the questions that it generated up to that point and that I was curious to investigate. What do you need to take your research forward? What are the skills, what are the tools or the techniques that you lack or that your research lacks, but you can acquire them through the fellowship? Who are the people in the field who can transfer that knowledge? And most importantly, what knowledge or skills can you transfer to them as well? Another thing that helped my proposal was getting feedback. You'd want to get feedback and you'd want to get a lot of it. An important thing to consider here is getting feedback from various different angles. You'd want experts who can comment on the scientific aspects of your proposal, but you also want people in the field who are not experts in the specifics to help you polish bits and pieces that might seem clear to you as an expert, but not to others who might not be familiar with the exact specifics. You might also want to consider getting feedback from people who are familiar with the Marie Curie itself. These might be experts from national contact points, EURAXESS, previous or current fellows, etc. Bear in mind that feedback from both successful and unsuccessful applications can be insightful. Most of the times, you learn a lot more from unsuccessful rather than from successful applications. And this is closely related with my next piece of advice. Connect with peers. Connect with people that are applying together with you or have applied in the past. You can meet some of them through events like this one. Ask your universities, ask national contact points, and also something that I found really useful is search the web for forums and groups. For example, it is very common to find groups on like messenger apps where people from each application round share insights, thoughts, questions, and answers. The final tip I have to share, which you probably heard quite a few times, is to start early. And start early with every aspect of the Marie Curie, not only in terms of the proposal itself, but also in terms of brainstorming ideas, brainstorming work packages, networking, finding potential supervisors or potential institutions, familiarizing with the eligibility criteria and the application process, navigate your support system, and so on. But how early is early, right? My view, I would say that you start as soon as you decide that the Marie Curie is something you wish to apply for. Whether you plan to submit for the next round or the year after, or even in 2 years, start today. Think of ideas, think of potential supervisors, think of skills you'd like to work on, and start building a solid idea as early as possible. By the way, these are 2 photos from 2 separate European Researcher Night events taken at the Marie Curie photo booth. On the left, that's me as a 3rd-year undergrad student in 2018, and on the right, as a 3rd-year PhD student in 2022, exactly 1 year before I applied for the fellowship. I knew very early on that I wanted to become a researcher, and I knew early on that I wanted to apply for the Marie Curie. And this has helped me navigate the system very early on. And because I feel like I already talked too much, I wanted to keep this brief and simple. I just want to summarize my 2 cents. So the take-home messages from my talk today are, you need to work hard on the Marie Curie, but do have other options. Don't make it your only career option. Start with your idea, not with your destination. Build your proposal based on where you want your research to go, not solely on where you want to be. Get feedback, the more the merrier. Get lots of it and get it from various sources with different levels of expertise. Connect with peers and other applicants. Find people who are going through the process or who have gone through the process in the past. And the sooner the start, the better. Start today. Even if you're applying for a later round, the earlier you start putting your plan together, the stronger your proposal is going to be. And that's all from my end, but I'm more than happy to discuss or clarify anything. And also, please do feel free to reach out via email or Blue Sky if you feel like I can help with anything further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Firoz. I think it was very excellent. And you didn't talk too long. We can just even have a session with you because probably you're going to get a lot of questions, right? I think just Xavi and you can just stay for extra 2 hours to get the questions. So thank you so much. And it was so fun and creative, the presentation. So Jackson, let's look at the questions. If I think we can let you a few seconds to look at the questions, whether you would like to answer, or Xavi, you can just also jump in and say if there is some technical details as well.
Yeah,
Jackson.
absolutely. What I'll do is I'll just remind the chat everything you've said very well, Daria, that if you have technical comments, feel free to use the chat box for that. But the Q&A box for everything else. With regards to Xavi, our great speaker coming up next, we'll hold off on the questions that might be best for you. And for Fivos, who does have to go soon, has been very generous with your time. Actually, I can buy myself some time here. I'll invite you to go through the written questions yourself, Fivos. But the most important one is the asker correctly indicates. What's the cat's name and how old is your cat?
The cat's name is Marcus. Marcus was born in 2020, and he's currently in Cyprus, actually. He's not with me.
So we'll expect the update then in 2 years, I suppose, the long-term reunion. I've taken to answering a few questions with written responses that I can answer right off the top of my head. So those who are curious can go to the answered tab of the Q&A box and start following those. I see also some of the other speakers and panelists are writing answers for the questions relevant to them. But other than that, I'll think we'll just maybe take a minute or two to encourage the audience to ask your burning questions to specifically regarding the application process, maybe some of these more subjective things that are a little bit less administrative and technical and legal and financial, but that is a perspective or upcoming applicant you might want to ask Fivos while we have him. And I suppose I could elaborate and sort of offer yourself, Fivos, to have those perspectives. We had 10% of the audience say that they're prospective supervisors. So if any of that small chunk of the audience has questions about, well, how do I find great candidates like Fivos and advertise my university, myself as a prospective host, then I think, well, the questions are yours. So I'll really encourage you to take this remaining minute or two, and we'll all take a look to see what comes in. Fivos, I don't recall the tip numbers, but someone asks if you are willing to elaborate at all on tip number 2.
Sure. So tip number 2 was the reverse engineering part. It might help if I give a more specific example, I think. So one of the things, I'm going to use Western as an example because we're here and I'm here now. But one thing that I've come across with a few times, been chatting with peers or with other successful and unsuccessful applicants, was that some people wanted to go somewhere specific. Let's say that I feel like I want to come to Western to do a postdoctoral fellowship. And based on that, they'll try to find supervisors that might be doing something closely related to try and put something together, an idea together. And usually, if you reverse engineer this procedure this way, it's reflected in your proposal in the sense that because it's an idea that it stems from, I want to be there at that specific place. It does, it's not necessarily, it might lack in terms of like the scientific backbone or the expertise backbone, because you're trying to fit pieces of the puzzle together that might not be there. My approach was, after my PhD, I had a couple of questions that made total sense for the research to go forward. And considering that this is partly an excellence grant as well, so the excellence research part is important, it made sense for me to think, okay, how do I know that my research is lacking this to answer this specific question. I knew a few people in the field who were doing that kind of work. So I tried to take my research where it was meant to be rather than go somewhere and find research to do there. I hope that helps.
I think you very eloquently said something I've sort of informally had conversations with about people involved that say evaluators sort of have a smell test and they can see if things logically follow, sort of the puzzle pieces all fit together. So I think maybe I'll start adopting your description because you said it very well. I will leave it to you to decide when you really have to go. And I know we want to keep on accurate time, but I would love to maybe dive in briefly to another question or two, since a lot of people have some continued questions that I think will very naturally, some of these will point to EURAXESS. So I promise these are organic questions truly submitted by the audience. People are asking how you found your supervisor in Reno for your outgoing global phase, but then also how to connect with supervisors in Europe. So I guess the whole point of the whole purpose of how do you find host institutes and supervisors?
That's a great question, and I think a burning question for a lot of people. My approach, again, is very related to the answer that I gave previously. I knew that my research needed something specific. I'm not going to talk in terms so that I don't mix up, but let's say that I'm studying memory. I'm interested in how memory, how we form memories. And I'm using a specific tool to study memory. But this tool cannot tell us a lot about what's happening in the actual brain. It can only tell us something very, very specific. So I needed to find someone who's working with the tools that can tell us something about the brain so that I can bring our research together. So I was actually looking into the literature and finding the people who were active and doing this kind of stuff. And then I reached out and I said, I'm doing this kind of work. I'd love to give a presentation to your lab. And I would like to talk about the opportunity of maybe preparing a grant together, a Marie Curie together, for me to come there as a postdoc. And when you reach out to people and say that I want to try and bring my own money to join your lab, people are very open to that idea, typically.
Thank you so much. I think you've addressed so much that I don't know if there's much to elaborate on, but someone asks about things like finding forums to connect to peers. And if there's specific examples you want to highlight, I noticed there was what looked like a Cyprus specific hashtag. So maybe the answer will really depend on where you are, where you want to go in one of your earlier slides. But yeah, let's say someone starting from scratch that's just learning about this today and really wants to take your advice to heed.
I am aware of quite a few. I am a member, for example, in one WhatsApp group, which it's the Marie Curie fellows that submitted applications during the 2023 round. And I joined this group before the application deadline, so we could exchange some conversations. And then after the results came out, that group was migrating to a second group, which was the successful applicants. And I'm pretty sure that this happens quite often in every year. And the way I found it basically was I was searching for forums on the web, like a quick Google search of like application for the Marie Curie for the specific year. And there's a lot of people who are active in those forums and groups. And that's how I found the WhatsApp group. Someone posted it on the forum and said, we have this thing going, join if you want.
Thank you so much. I might invite you then to just look at the pending questions. I think we have a lot that Xavi and the rest of us will be able to get to. So this may be where we leave you to continue your very busy day. I'm happy to tackle a lot of these by writing out some answers during the upcoming presentations and then also sharing them with Xavi live. But I'll invite you to then either take a question or close out. And we just want to thank you so much before Daria continues to invite the upcoming speakers.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me here. And I apologize, but I've got another presentation in a few minutes. So it was lovely being here. And please reach out to me via email if you'd like to have another discussion or connect. I'm happy to do that as well.
Thank you, viewers. I think it was really very helpful, and probably you can get some more questions afterwards, hopefully. Okay, and enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck with your presentation. You see how he's really busy, nonstop in time of his work. Okay, so now Also, what I saw in the Q&A box is that there's so many other questions, as Jackson mentioned, waiting for Xavi to just elaborate on more, because there's so many details. So right now we're just going to jump in and another session, and then I'm really excited to have Xavi out here with us. So he's going to mainly mention about the generalities, like the overall spread, the key definitions, what is beneficiary, what is associated partners. I think these are so burning questions. Is the US or Canada is eligible? Can we get funding? Which kind of sectors and panels, and especially the eligibility part. I think it's so important and more. Floor is yours. Xavi is the NCP for MSCA. I think you're going to share this valuable information with us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Delia. Thank you, Jackson, for inviting me to be in this info session. And yeah, well, I mean, it feels kind of pressured now to be after FIBOS, because I always say that in all the info sessions, of course, national contact points being representatives of the program in our own countries, I mean, we are expected to be like kind of the key information about how to participate, but a lot of the things that I will be telling are actually in documents. So I always say that the real knowledge is actually in the practitioners. So always when you have a practitioner in the room, somebody who has gone through the application, has obtained the project and is currently working on it, pay a lot of attention to what he or she is saying, because that's where the real knowledge on the preparation of a proposal is. And actually, I'm happy to say that I will be touching on some things, trying to be a little bit practical, and they're very much in line with what has been already mentioned by FIBOS. So I'm Xavi Eicaut, as I said. I'm the national contact point for Spain, and I work in the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology. And the reason, I mean, we are a foundation which belongs to the Spanish Ministry of Science and Innovation, and one of the roles that we have is actually trying to support our community and our institutions to participate in EU-funded programs. So we have a number of NCPs, including the ones of Marie Curie, which is me and myself and some other people that I will show afterwards, working there. I'm sorry to say that my presentation is actually, well, you've seen it in the agenda. It's going to be long. It's going to be on the longest side because, I mean, conceptually, it's kind of an easy program, and that's why what it makes it so attractive. But then, I mean, Europe is, let's say, a complex club. We are quite a number of countries, so we need to play around with the similar rules and so on. So once you start looking into these apparently simple program, you realize there are like so many exceptions and so many things that you need to take into account to see what are the possibilities of making the most out of the program. So the first thing is I will be talking a little bit about the generalities of the program, and then I will dive into the MSCA postdoctoral fellowships on the practicalities, and then I might show you some figures if I have time enough, because I put my clock on and I promise I will not go longer than the time that I've been granted. So the first thing is to highlight that in the spirit of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, excellent science is at the center. So there is no MSCA action without excellent science happening within it. But the important thing is that you have to remember that it's not only about the research, it's also about the career development and the training of the researchers. Because specific or particularly the MSCA-PF, the postdoctoral fellowships, they are aimed at, let's say, reasonably early stage postdoctoral researchers. So it's actually a research activity, but also a training and research activity. The other thing that you must keep in mind is what we call the 3 I's. It's a highly international program which aims at fostering international mobility, and this is basically enforced by what we call the mobility rule, which has been addressed by FIBOS already, about, let's say, this requirement, which basically means that you will need to move to another country. And I will explain how that works in the two different kinds of MSCA postdoctoral fellowships. But the other 2 I's stand for intersectoral collaboration and mobility, and interdisciplinarity. So these 3 I's have to be included in every single proposal in order to be successful. And just for you to know, I mean, the way that the MSCAs are put together is because they're looking obviously to have an impact in the postdoctoral researcher. So they want to help researchers to advance in their careers, to increase their employability, to make them even better researchers. But it's also actions that are looking to achieve an impact in the institutions and even in the ecosystem. So when I talk about the ecosystems, it's about the other institutions that are collaborating. So the network of institutions which might be around, which would be your main host institution. So all of these things are important to keep in mind when you start thinking about the proposal. The other important aspect, and which I think that makes it as one of the most appealing EU-funded programs for researchers, is that it's completely open to all thematics. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that whatever proposal you put into, including that international dimension, including that interdisciplinary dimension, including that intersectoral dimension, nevertheless, you still have to put it in one of these 8 panels that you see here. So you can make a proposal basically from any field of knowledge. You will be expected to be touching on other disciplines and so on. But at some point, at the end of the day, when you launch the proposal, it will be evaluated in one of these 8 knowledge panels. The other important thing that you have to know about MSCA actions is that by definition, they are funded 100% of the research action that you are going to propose. But it's funded through what we call unit cost. And this basically means that when you present a proposal, you define the time that your project will be running. And basically, you have a number of pre-defined unit costs which will apply in your cases. And this will come up with a closed budget of what your project, a budget of that your project will have. We will see that how it works exactly in the postdoctoral fellowships. But just as an initial introduction, you have to keep in mind that part of the funding is what we call the contributions for recruited researchers. And this is, putting it in some way, it's a bag of money that is used to pay the salary of the postdoctoral researcher. So that's basically the blue side of what you see in that table. And that is applied for the number of months that the project will take place. And for each of those months of the recruited researchers, you have what we call the institutional unit cost, which is another amount which is given to the institution in order to allow for the implementation of the research and innovation action. But again, we will see that with exact numbers of how it looks in particularly in the postdoctoral fellowships. And I was talking now about terminology. When we go through the preparation of the proposal, you will need to be familiarized with this terminology. So the participation officially is from the side of the institutions, and we have a differentiation here. We have what we call the beneficiaries, and we have what we call the associated partners. Beneficiaries, on most cases, and it applies definitely in postdoctoral fellowships, the beneficiaries are always institutions located in Europe. And I use Europe in a general way, but what I'm meaning here is EU, the European Union member states, plus associated countries to the Horizon Europe program, which again, speaking very generally, I will refer to as Europe along the presentation. And then the associated partners can be located anywhere in the world. And associated partners can have different roles, but they can most commonly, they are institutions where you go to take secondments, so for temporary stays during the implementation of your research project, or they can be places where you go to get some pieces of the training that you need in order to implement your research project. And as you can see there with that star, I was highlighting that by default, any institution located in North America, in Canada, or in the US or whatever, would participate in MSCA as an associated partner. And then in the case of the institutions, just to clarify that these institutions can be from the academic sector or from the non-academic sector. And in MSCA jargon, when we talk about academic and non-academic, in the case of academic, we're basically talking about public and private universities, and we're talking about public research performing organizations. And when we talk about the non-academic organizations, it's basically the rest of the world. And this is where I want to emphasize the idea that obviously we're talking about companies, we're talking about industry here, but it's not only industry. When we talk about non-academic sector in Marie Curie, we're also talking maybe about public administrations, we may be talking about hospitals, we may be talking about NGOs. So as I said, it's basically the rest of the world. And just a flavor of all that you can find within the MSCA program. We are going to be talking about the postdoctoral fellowships, which are what we would call the individual actions. And as I will show you, they're not really individual, but yet these are the ones which are basically triggered from the side of a postdoctoral researcher wanting to apply to Marie Curie. Then just for you to know, we have two consortium programs, which are doctoral networks and staff exchange. Doctoral networks are projects in which several institutions get together in order to offer an innovative doctoral program. And staff exchange programs are a consortium project in which several institutions get together in order to implement a research and innovation action through the exchange of staff between the institutions. And then I will also mention the co-fund, which is a monobeneficiary action, which is only open for European institutions, and MSCA and citizens, which is a bit the different thing because it's a call which happens every 2 years, and it's basically to fund outreach activities of MSCA actions. So participation for third country institutions is actually open to postdoctoral fellowships, to doctoral networks, and staff exchange projects. And now going into the details of the postdoctoral fellowships. This is the calendar that we currently have for the call, because all of these calls that I showed you, except MSCA and citizens, which is every 2 years, all of the MSCA calls are periodic and they come up every year. So postdoctoral fellowships was planned to be open on the 9th of April, but it's going to open on the 8th of May at the end of the day. I mentioned this because maybe somebody of you still browse around looking for when the call of MSCA postdoctoral fellowships is going to happen. You might still find information somewhere where it says the 9th of April, but no, the official opening day will be the 8th of May. And the closing, the call deadline, which is really the important date, is on the 10th of March of 2025. And what this means, Phoebos actually mentioned that Marie Curie offered quite a lot of flexibility in terms of when you can start the project if you get the funding. You can see there a figure. So in terms of the, let's say, the typical calendar that we see every year is that by September, the call will be closed. You will have the evaluations in November or something like that. And eventually results normally are published in February. Well, all of the projects that obtain funding on and are announced on February 2026 could start potentially the following month, right immediately after signing the grant agreement, meaning March 2026. But the fellow, in agreement with his or her host institution, they can postpone it as much as up until September 2027. So it's almost 2 years later after the call, in order to allow the fellows to finalize an ongoing project or for whatever family reasons which might come up, and they decide that to start a little bit later. So lots of flexibility there on that side. And what is the aim that we're looking for in the case of the postdoctoral fellowships? Well, it's very much in line with what I was saying about the overall MSCA program. So the idea is that through the individual projects, you will be providing support to excellent postdoctoral researchers in order to make them even better researchers. So you are intended to present or to have during the PF an excellent research project. But as I was saying, you also have to have a strong focus on the professional development of the postdoctoral researcher and working not only on the research, let's say, scientific and technical skills, which of course are a key part of the proposal, but also transferable skills. Because the aim, as I said, is to boost the employability of the postdoctoral researchers which go through the MSCA-PF program. And finally, as I said, key to all of the MSCA actions, every proposal should try to address in the best way possible the 3 I's. The international will come by default, The intersectoral is expected to be included in basically every single proposal. And again, with that very wide understanding of what the non-academic sector is. And interdisciplinarity is also a key content of the proposals, of the innovative proposals. And now yeah. Is it moving? Can you confirm? Because
I see main objectives still.
yeah, because now I see a message which says that your function is in pause, your share function.
Well, if you'd like to stop sharing and reshare, we can take a look there. We're not using SharePoint or anything on our side, so I wonder.
Yeah, I'm just
And if not, we'll try that, and then failing that, we can. I can drive, so to say.
Okay, now it should be moving again. I don't know why it stopped. Whatever.
I see it. Thank you.
We have to, well, you see there MSCA-PF 2023. As I said, these are periodic calls, so we reuse some slides. So this hasn't changed. It's actually quite of a stable program. So what does it offer? We basically have two modalities of MSCA postdoctoral fellowships. We have European postdoctoral fellowships, and we have global postdoctoral fellowships, like the one that FIBO has won. The European postdoctoral fellowships are basically for being implemented in a European country, in a European host institution, with a duration of 12 to 24 months, which can be selected if you want it up to 24 months. And then you have the possibility of having 6 additional months at the end of these maximum 24 months, and what we call a non-academic placement. And this, as you can expect, needs to take place within a host institution, which is from the non-academic sector. And again, this is not mandatory in the proposals, but it's, let's say, an asset that you can add in to your proposal. Again, if it makes sense, as FIBO was saying, he had a very strong point in that idea of the reverse engineering. In the case of the global postdoctoral fellowships, what we have is an outgoing phase to a third country. So basically, you have the same period, the 12 to 24 months. In this case, it's implemented in a third country outside Europe, so outside a EU member state or an associated country to Horizon Europe. And you have a mandatory return phase to the host institution in Europe. So it's at the end of the day, it's up to 36 months duration of the project. And like in the case of the European Fellowship, you have the possibility of adding those up to 6 months of non-academic placement in a non-academic associated partner located in a European country. Other things apart from the placements that you have that are not mandatory that you can add in your project if it makes sense is what we call the secondments. So it's also temporary stays in other institutions. And these can take place, or you can include them both in the European postdoctoral fellowships and in the global postdoctoral fellowships. In the case of the European postdoctoral fellowships, they can take place in any moment during the entire duration of the project. In the case of the global postdoctoral fellowships, they can only take place during the time of the outgoing phase. So the time that you are in a third country, you can include those secondments. And the maximum duration of the secondments is of 1/3 of the total duration of the research periods of the project. So if it goes for 24 months for a maximum, you could have secondments of up to 8 months. Things that you need to keep in mind is that even though there are these two possibilities, in each call, one researcher can only apply to either one or the other. So you cannot prepare a proposal for postdoctoral for a European fellowship and a global fellowship and send both of them in the same call. And another thing to keep in mind is that there is a restriction to resubmissions. So if any of you, for example, applied last year in the 2024 call, and unfortunately you didn't get the funding, if you went over what is the official funding threshold, which is 70%, you could resubmit the same proposal without any problems. But if you did not have a score of more than 70%, then that same proposal would not be eligible to be sent again in this year. You could send a different proposal, which basically means going to a different host institution. And a couple of things to keep in mind when it comes to the participation. On one side is what we call the ERA fellowships. We have in Europe a number of countries, which we call widening countries, and I leave you a link there, and which are countries in which, let's say, additional effort, because this is actually from another part of Horizon Europe, so these are additional efforts in order to make these countries more attractive. So if you make a proposal for a European fellowship in one of the widening countries, and you get the evaluation, you get a high score, but don't get the funding, you might have a possibility of being, let's say, rescued with the funding of the ERA fellowship. So you have like a kind of a second possibility of getting funded, although the amount of funding of the ERA fellowships is much smaller than the postdoctoral fellowships. But just for you to know, in case of any of you, your project makes sense to be implemented in one of these widening countries. And basically what this means is that you're going to be evaluated exactly the same. And at some point during the application, you will mark a box where you will say that, yes, I would also like to participate in a ERA fellowship, as I'm going to one of the countries where these ERA fellowships are funded. And as I said, you will go through the normal evaluation. And if you get a high score but don't get the funding of the postdoctoral fellowships, you might be funded through the ERA fellowship scheme. And on the other side, you see Euratom, and this is a completely different funding program from Horizon Europe, which is the program where Marie Curie is. And basically, what it means here is that if your proposal is related with atomic energy or with nuclear research, it could be eligible to be funded by the Euratom project. And again, from the side of the fellow, this doesn't affect him or her in any way. Basically, through your proposal, if you are doing any kind of nuclear research and is aligned with the research and training activities of the Euratom program, you will be expected to mark a box in the application. And basically what could happen is if your proposal gets selected for funding, instead of getting the money from the bag of the Marie Curie actions, you will get money from the bag of Euratom. It doesn't matter because it's still a Marie Curie action. And the only good news is for the Marie Curie program, because maybe the money that you leave free will be for somebody from the reserve list. So this is also quite nice. And who participates? Basically, I've already mentioned that we have the institutions on one side. You have the beneficiary, which will be always the institution which is in Europe in both cases, obviously in the European fellowship, because it's, let's say, the only host institution, apart from the places that you could go on secondment. But in the case of the global fellowships, also the host institution of the return phase. This will be the beneficiary. And then you have the associated partners, which can be the institution of the outgoing phase of the global fellowship, and also the non-academic institution or organization, which you could include as part of your voluntary non-academic placement if you decide to put it in your proposal. Again, I already mentioned both sectors, non-academic sectors participate with no difference, except for the non-academic placement, obviously, which, as I said, has to be a non-academic organization. And from the side of the researchers, basically, we have two figures that we have to differentiate. One of them, which is the researcher or the fellow, who's the postdoctoral researcher applying for the Marie Curie fellowship, and the supervisor in the different, mainly on the host institution, but also in the associated partners, particularly in the case of the outgoing phase. So I saw some questions already in the Q&A box, which were related with the eligibility. So if you would be entitled to participate in this program, well, these are the things that you need to keep in mind in order to see if you can participate or not. The first one is obviously a postdoctoral program. So you need to have a PhD degree. The other thing is you need to keep in mind is the nationality. On the side of the European fellowships, the one which are with a destination to Europe, there is no restriction whatsoever to any nationality. So all nationals are open to participate in the European fellowships. The global fellowships, nevertheless, do have a restriction on nationality. On one hand, they are open to European nationals, to EU member states and associated countries, but they could also be open to any third country national who can prove that they have been long-term residents in a European country, in a member state or in an associated country. So if you are a third country national who has already been a long-term resident, and that means living for more than 6 years in continuous 6 years in Europe, then you would be eligible to participate in a global fellowship. And then you have the other criteria, which is about the research experience. I mentioned that the MSCA-PF particularly, they are aimed at, let's say, more early stage postdoctoral researchers. And the way that this is imposed in the program is that there is a maximum of postdoctoral research experience that an eligible candidate could have. And that is 8 years of full-time dedication to postdoctoral research experience. And there are a few exceptions that can affect also, even if your PhD degree, you received your PhD degree longer than 8 years ago. Because by the way, all of these things, the PhD degree, well, obviously the nationality wouldn't change, but in the case of the, well, actually in the case of the long-term residents, maybe. But well, all of these criteria need to be met exactly on the day that the call closes. So on the 10th of September of 2025, you have to meet all of these things. And the final criteria, which is the one which, the reason why I said that international mobility came kind of as a default, is what we call the mobility rule. And the mobility rule says that you are only an eligible researcher in a given country of destination if you have not spent more than 12 months in total along the last 36 months in that country where you want to go. Okay? So regarding the exceptions of the 8 years, things that you could, let's say, discount if on the 10th of September of 2025 you look 8 years back, so it would be on the 10th of September of 2017. If you had your PhD degree after the 10th of September of 2017, there's nothing to consider, so it's less than 8 years experience. But in case you had it before, you need to look into these possibilities in case any of them apply. You have exceptions for maternal leaves. In the case of women researchers, it's 1.5 years per child. In the case of paternal leave, it's whatever you have enjoyed in the situation in which you were. Other more unfortunate things, such as sick leaves, long-term sick leaves, can also be removed from this research experience, and what we would call career breaks. And obviously, career breaks means periods where you unfortunately might have been unemployed, but also periods of time where you may have been working in something different than postdoctoral research. As this is kind of, well, you have the slides and you will be able to look at it. Nevertheless, I've included these links that you can see where you have the guidelines and where you have the a kind of self-assessment tool. By the way, in the applications, I mean, if you're going to be using any of this, and also in the case of the mobility criteria, you will be expected to have documents supporting the claims that you make, that you meet all of these eligibility criteria. But it's important to keep in mind that none of these documents really need to be included in the proposal themselves. So during the preparation of the proposal, you will basically explain that you meet everything, although your host institution will most likely request the documentation, because in case you get the funding, so February next year, before the funding the grant agreement is formalized between the institution and the European Commission, the European Commission will check that all of these things that you can prove that you are meeting all of the criteria. So, quick reminder, because as I said, it's relatively simple, but then with all the different possibilities, it started getting a little bit messy. European fellowships. Mobility rule, you cannot be, if you want to go to a country in Europe, you want to go to Spain, you want to go to France, you may not have been in France or Spain in these examples more than 12 months along the last 36 months. You need to have a PhD degree at the time of the call deadline. And you can have the possibility of requesting a secondment, which I didn't state it, by the way, sorry for that, but a secondment can take place basically anywhere in the world. And I highlighted there because this is another place where North American institutions can also come in play. Because you could have a European fellowship being implemented, let's say in Spain, in the Spanish institution, but if you go for 24 months, your 8-month secondment could actually take place anywhere in North America during a European fellowship. And then those 6 months of possible extension for a non-academic placement if it makes sense in your project. And the best way to see this is through some through some examples. So here I put one. Normally I do this as a quiz, but here it's kind of difficult. But here we imagine that we have a researcher who has a US nationality. He or she got the PhD degree in the US in October 2017. Then she went, basically what I show you there is that up until now, he or she has been working as a postdoctoral researcher, first in Spain, then in the US. And currently, since 3 years ago, this person has been doing research in Italy, and he has planned to request a European fellowship, which will take place in Spain. So going through all of the criteria, European fellowship, in the case of the nationality, it doesn't make any difference because it's open to all nationalities. So the fact that this person is from the US is not important. In the case of the experience, it says October 2017. I mentioned that the call deadline is on the 10th of September of 2025. So 8 years before means September 2017. So the 10th of December of 2017. This person got his PhD just a year after. Just a month after. So he would be eligible just for 1 month difference. And then finally, the mobility rule. Although this person has been for 1 year in Spain back in 2018, 2019, we have to look just the last 3 years, which basically means back until September 2022. So this person has been working and living in Italy for the last 3 years, would be perfectly eligible to go to Spain. In the case of the global fellowships, again, a bit of a reminder, 12 to 24 months in an outgoing phase in a third country. Nationality restrictions, initially open to all European nationals, to EU nationals and associated countries nationals, but also to long-term residents in a member state or associated country. Same rule for the postdoctoral research experience, same mobility rule, and same possibilities of requesting either a secondment or a non-academic placement. So this is an example which is a little bit more, let's say, putting all possible things that could happen in an example. So in this case, we have a researcher from Canada. She got her PhD degree in Portugal in August 2017. And then she worked until August 23, so for 6 years in a row in Portugal, before she went back to continue her postdoctoral research to the US in 2024. She had a son in 2020. And since January 2025, she's working, for example, at Western University. And she has thought that she would like to request a global fellowship with the following structure. I'm going to, the beneficiary would be, again, a Portuguese university. So, for example, Universidade do Minho. The associated partner of the outgoing phase would be Canada, and precisely the same exact institution where she currently is working since January 2025. And basically that would mean that she would be 24 months in Canada and then return back to Portugal for 12 months. So in this case, again, we look at all of the situations. Nationality. Here we have a red flag, which would be that she is from Canada. So she's not a European national. But as I said, apart from doing her PhD in Portugal, which probably was 4 years, she then worked for 6 years as a postdoctoral researcher, meaning that she has been for 6 years on a row in Europe. Doesn't matter that she went back to the US because this status of long-term resident, as of today, let's say never expires. It's always valid. And what about the experience? Well, she had her PhD degree in August 2017, sorry. This means that as of September 2025, she has 8 years plus 1 month of postdoctoral research experience, because all of her positions have been as a postdoctoral researcher. So initially, here's a red flag because she would not meet the criteria of experience. But as I put there, she had a son in 2020, which means that automatically you would have to discount 1.5 years from her research experience and she would become eligible. And the final thing is about the mobility rule. She's currently in Canada, but she arrived in January 2025. Also, there could be another red flag here because she wants to go to Canada. And I think I failed to mention that in the case of the global fellowships, the mobility rule is measured on the outgoing country, so on the third country. But as she's been there since the 1st of January, as of the 10th of September, she would have been in Canada only for 9 months and 10 days, meaning that it's less than 12 months along the last 3 years. So she would be eligible in every single spot. So this is a very kind of messy example, but trying to put all of the conditions there together. And now let's go to the funding. As I said, you see here the box of the unit costs that apply. There's not much to do around the budget that you get for MSCA, apart from knowing what you will be receiving, but there's really no calculations to be made apart from stating your country of destination and how long your project will be running, because you can see there the exact figures that apply to the different categories that I mentioned. On the side of the recruited researchers, we have the biggest chunk of what would be used for the salary, which is what we call the living allowance. And it's important to highlight that this living allowance is subject to what we call a country coefficient correction, or country correction coefficient, sorry. So depending on the country where you are going to be going, in the case of a European fellowship, in the European country where you'll be happening, in the case of the global fellowship, first the country of the third country of destination of the outgoing phase, and then when you get back to 12 months to the European country. Well, here you apply this country correction coefficient, which you can find in the work programs. And then you would have all the candidates would be eligible for the mobility allowance, because the idea behind it is that you are forced to move internationally. So obviously you get a kind of additional funding in order to cover that obligation. And then you have another unit cost, which might apply or not, depending on your situation, which is the family allowance. And the family allowance is applicable to any researcher who has any kind of family obligations, meaning spouse, so being married, or in any other legal status which is recognized in the country where this, let's say this connection took place, or has children. In this case, you are eligible for the family allowance. And then there are 2 additional allowances which are put at disposition of the institutions in case the need arises. The first one is a long-term leave allowance. So during those 2 years of project, for example, in a European fellowship, if the person needs to go on a long-term leave, for example, for maternal leave or something like that, the grant is stopped, so the action is stopped, and the institution can request additional funding to the European Commission in order to cover the time that this long-term leave takes place. And the final part of the recruited researcher unit costs is the special needs allowance. And this applies also in case of need if the researcher has any kind of functional diversity or is handicapped in any way. So this person needs some kind of adjustment in their working space in order to be able to implement their projects. A very straightforward example would be somebody with some kind of visual impairment, and they would need some kind of special computer equipment in order to do all of their work. Then the institution could request the special needs allowance in order to cover these needs. And then in the side of the institution, there you can see the amounts, what we call the research training and networking contribution, which are actually for the researcher also, because this is an amount, 1,000 euros per month of the duration of the project. So 24,000 euros in a total duration of 24 months, which are put at the disposition of the fellow in order to implement all those capacity building actions that he or she might need in order to assist conferences, in order to cover the costs of the secondments. So if they go 8 months on a secondment, the money would need to come from here. And finally, what we call the management and indirect costs, basically, which is for the use of the institution in order to run the project that is taking place within its premises. And here you see an example of a European fellowship in the case of Spain. So you see there that the amounts that I showed you, and for 24 months, well, basically, if it's going to take place in Spain, you need to apply the living allowance, the country correction coefficient, which in the case of Spain is 0.956. And basically, you multiply by the number of months, and this is the budget that you have for your project. And as I said, this is basically done automatically, just saying where you're going to go and how long are you going to stay. And this is the budget that you get. And let me see how we're going in terms of time. I think I'm quite late. So just for you to know that for preparing the applications, we have two parts in the applications. If you start working in this, you will find your way around, or you can ask the NCPs, of course. But basically for you to know that there is a part A, which is the administrative part, where you put all of the administrative information, where you ask about when you get your PhD degree, if you get any exceptions in those 8 years of experience that you are expected to meet, where have been the places where you have stayed for the mobility criteria, and also some other things, which ethical requirements and so on. And then the important part, which is the narrative part. This is where you will be working most of the time that you work on the proposals. It's part B, the technical part. B1 is really where most of your effort will be put, because this is where you have the 3 sections: excellence, impact, and implementation, and where you will basically have to describe your entire project. And this has a strict page limit of 10 pages in total to put there everything which is requested to be included in the proposal. And then part B, part B2, which somehow complements the information of part B1. And in the case of the evaluation, the 3 criteria are taken into account: excellence, impact, and implementation, with a different weight. Excellence weights a little bit more, 50%, impact 30%, implementation 20%. And they also apply in priority. So with the same score, if an application has a higher score in excellence than the other one, that one will go on top of the previous one. I'm going to tell you really quickly, in the side of excellence, basically what you are expected to reflect about are the project objectives, the research and innovation objectives. You will have to work on the methodology, but then you will have to work a little bit on something that Fibo already mentioned, which is, why are you going to be working with that supervisor? Why do you want to go to that institution? Which is your CV? And what will you achieve by going to that place and working with that people, and will allow you to do your very ambitious research experience. So that's all the part of excellence. In the side of impact, you are expected to reflect on how implementing this project is going to help you develop as a researcher and give you your technical and scientific skills in order to, let's say, boost your employability. And it can be your employability in the academic sector and in the non-academic sector. You will also have to plan how you're going to be managing the outcomes of your research. So basically putting together the draft of a communication, dissemination, and exploitation plan. And then you will also have to reflect about the scientific, societal, and economic impact of your proposal. And in the side of the implementation, it's all about how your research project is going to be implemented. You put this all in a number of tables related with work packages, with tasks that you have to break down the content of your proposal. And then you also have to give a bit of explanation of why the institution, your host institution, is the right place where this project should take place, with you running it together with your supervisor. So when I talked about individual fellowships, I said this was not really individual actions. I said that this was not really true. And it's not true because ideally, and again, Fibo has mentioned this, and also at the introduction about contacting with your host institution, this was a very important piece of information, because in theory, I mean, it's normal that the fellows are the ones who work the most in the proposal. Obviously, the supervisors have to work hand on hand on preparing that, but it's also important that the institutions are contacted as soon as possible in order to make sure that all of these pieces work together. And finishing a little bit with what I started, please remember that we are talking about excellent science in these projects, but it's not only about excellent science. It's also about that, let's say, professional development piece that cannot be missing in the proposal. So when you write about the proposal, you need to think about, I mean, for example, what you were saying about the reverse engineering, about the things that you need to keep in mind before you actually start working in the proposal itself, is that it has to be a project which will allow you to gain knowledge. So you have to find the right place of where, based on your current expertise, what you want to achieve and whose support you will need to do it. You will also have to think a lot in terms of skills. You will have to think about the scientific and technical skills that you need in order to implement the projects, also the ones that you have and that you will be bringing as an added value to the institution where you're going, and the ones that you will be developing by being in that institution. You will also have to think about networking, and this might be particularly important in the case of the global fellowships, because you are putting together, let's say, 3 pieces there. It's you, your host institution, and the associated partner, and the supervisors in both of the institutions. Also, you will notice in the proposals that there's a very important part, which is about the communication and dissemination of the activities of the projects and of the outcomes of the projects. And then again, it's all about mobility and how the knowledge is exchanged between the different participants. So I will finish just with the practical tips, because I also included some information on the recent results. Well, actually, I'm going to show you something of the results. I think I have 1 minute. But in any case, practical tips, which have been better explained already by Figos. So I mentioned involve your host institution on the scientific part, because as I said, you want to explain that that host institution is the right place to implement your project, but also in very practical terms. Because, for example, at the beginning, Michaela was saying that that she could help you with the visa issues. So visa issues need to be taken into account when you're moving, especially to a third country, and in order of planning your work and making sure that you can meet all the deadlines that you put there. So it's also about the practical things. It's also about understanding how that piece of money that you have available for your salary, how will that actually transform into your salary? Because all of that is given to the institution in order to set up a contract, a working contract, and pay your salary. And all the costs related with the employers and with the employees, all taxes and so on that need to be taken into account in the country and the institution are removed from that place. So that amount will decrease significantly when it gets to what will be your salary. So because of all these practical aspects, it's very important and very recommended that you speak with your potential host institution as soon as possible. Speak with the national contact points. Remember that depending on the country where you're going, there are some country specificities with which the national contact point might help you. So I might help you with some things in Spain about how things work in Spain, but obviously I don't know if it's exactly the same in France or if it's exactly the same in Germany. On the side of the evaluation, I mentioned that there are different ratios, so different weights in the sections. But nevertheless, I will show you, and I promise that will be the last slide, the results or the cutoff scores of the last call. And this is an extremely highly competitive call. So basically, it doesn't matter if you have excellence perfect and impact perfect, because if implementation is not nearly perfect, you will not get the funding because it's that competitive. Make sure to use the right template. So the call is still not open, but it will be open in short. And there you will have the documents of how to take them. And well, try to use some buzzwords related with everything that I was saying. Talk about innovation. Remember to talk about research career. Remember to talk about collaboration, intersectoral, interdisciplinary, intersectoral, also about skills. And as I said, also the training and one important message about the CV of the researcher. Remember that the proposals is all of a team. So your CV does not need to be perfect. Basically, you just have to make sure that the team that you're putting together, researcher, supervisor, host institutions, is what will make you, what will secure a successful project. So it's not only about the CV. And I wanted to show you the cutoff scores. These were the results of 2024. There were more than 10,000 applications in 2024, of which more than 1,600 were finally funded. You can see there that the main countries in terms of numbers, but as I said, the most importantly, the scores for European fellowships and global fellowships. I mentioned that 70% is the threshold for getting the funding, but these were the scores in order to actually get the funding. So you are eligible for funding above 70%. It's a good proposal above 70%. It's an excellent proposal above 85% because you're granted what is called a seal of excellence, recognizing the quality of your proposal. But the reality is that above 90 something, depending on the proposal, below 90 something, you will not be getting funding. So that's why I was highlighting that you really need to aim to getting it perfect in every point. And I will stop here. As I said, you have some additional statistics about the results of the previous years, and I've also included some slides with resources in order to try to find the potential supervisors, but also some resources to prepare the proposals, particularly those which are developed by the MSCA Net project, where you have basically the proposal template of last year and the content which is expected to go in each place. And that's a document which is an obligatory reading for everybody applying for one of these actions. And that's it. Sorry, I went like 5 minutes above if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so thank you so much, Xavi. Lots of details. It seems that it's too many, but I think it's not that complicated when you start. I think these kind of grants need some really detailed, exploration, not only work before that, because of this presentation is so valuable because we have so many clickable, links so that you can just update later on, because you need to check the deadlines and everything, when you're really going to apply. And I also want to mention that consistency is so important. You really have to work in advance, and you need to check the hosting organizations, the supervisors, and you can even, what I have heard is that when you just start working on your proposal, you may even change your hosting organization and, even your title, the main area of interest, everything can happen. So right now, I think we just need to answer a lot of questions what I saw in the Q&A box. So I'm going to leave the floor to Jackson to moderate this session. But Mihaela, if you also would like to just jump in and, answer some of the questions related to you, please take the floor. Yeah.
Thank you, Daria, and to Xavi, and of course, Mihaela. What I might do is try to buy a minute or two of time, so to say, for Xavi. I've been writing out some answers to the best of my ability that already show up in the answer tab that should be visible to all attendees. And I've left some questions that I really wanted to defer to your expertise. So I may invite a first question for Mihaela, and then Xavi, and in those minutes, maybe you can do your best to flag the questions you'd like to answer, or elaborate at any points. So I'll jump right in. And Mihaela, if I may ask you, and this is really broad, so I invite you to take it in the direction you want, but you did talk about your area of expertise and the many hats you wear, both at Western and then generally. So I know we'll oftentimes get questions from prospective MSCA fellows and current fellows who ask about taxes. And I know you mentioned this during your introduction, and where I'm under the impression, based on Xavi's comments, that the NCPs for MSCA are Europe-based. They're also in many other countries around the world, but there are no national contact points within Canada or the US. So do you have any initial guiding thoughts regarding taxes, visas, residency questions that you tend to get or have heard about your fellows getting, and where you can point them towards?
So for taxation, it depends on actually the country of citizenship. Living in Canada, you do have to pay taxes. So depending if Canada is in any agreement with other countries. So I would not take advice about taxation unless there is a certified accountant. So at Western, we have our contacts. So I think that all our institution probably in the States and Canada will have a contact, and it's very important that you address those questions before you actually live in Canada or USA. In terms of the work permit, as I mentioned, at each institution, there's going to be someone who is in charge of providing an offer of employment number. For Canada, all individuals that apply for a work permit will be connected with our offices, and they will need what's called a work permit with labor market impact assessment exemption. It sounds very complex, but for most of the European countries, and if you're a citizen of a European country and you do not need a visa, you can actually apply for a work permit at the port of entry. Right now, the processing time for a work permit is very lengthy, but we work very closely with all the candidates to ensure a smooth transition. So that would be probably my key message.
Thank you very much. I do see a follow-up question about if there's a particular person or office regarding taxation or Horizon Europe contact. I know for postdoctoral matters, you're my main point of contact, but for those that are, I'm assuming this might be a European who's interested in Western as a prospective post-institute. So in this case, who should they reach out to?
So they could reach out to me and I will connect them with the human resources.
Great, thank you. I think this may have been quite clear based on Daria's remarks and Xavi's remarks, but one thing I'll try to underscore something that for us at EURAXESS and maybe the NCPs in general, it's quite common knowledge, but for a first timer hearing this, it can be a bit overwhelming. So you have the 27 EU member states, you have the countries that basically on a bilateral basis get together with the European Commission, the EU, and they join Horizon Europe, or they join the EU's program for R&I, and then they get access on equal footing in simplified terms to all of this funding and these opportunities. Canada, as of last year, is associated to Horizon Europe, but only for Pillar 2, which unlike today, where we've been talking a lot about bottom-up programs in all fields, where the individual researcher applies and writes their own proposal, Pillar 2 is top-down open calls for consortium. So we will actually be hosting webinars on this in the future. I think as we close, Daria will invite you to join some upcoming sessions that we haven't scheduled dates for yet, but that will dig a bit deeper into all these different opportunities. So when you go online and you look at a list of the EU member states, these are either the countries you can go to on the European Fellowship or the associated countries. But just keep in mind, in this case, Canada and New Zealand are two countries that are associated, but not to Pillar 1. So sometimes it doesn't stick so hard if you don't have the famous Horizon Europe infographic in front of you or the little visual guide. But I would say you can look at those two lists, and ultimately it will become a list of about 45 or so countries that as an international researcher, you can go to Europe to any of those. So I'll maybe at this point invite Xavi to take a look at some of the pending questions, or if there's anything that can be elaborated on in my written answered questions. I'll actually just start with a question submitted during registration, in addition to all of the ones that have been submitted live, and ask just to make sure it's rounded off very well. You showed the table with the salary and all of the one-off costs as well, the institutional cost. So it's as simple as taking that base rate, which is listed in euros, and then adjusting for the percentage of the global countries. So in the case of Canada, the percentage I think was 114%. So one would take that number of euro, adjust it to that percentage, and then convert it into the local currency, which would be Canadian dollars in this example. And that would be the pre-tax salary, monthly salary or monthly payment to the European researcher that's in Canada on the Global Fellowship. And the same principle would apply to any other country in the world. You take the country's percentage and then convert to local currency. Is that right? Or is there any other adjustments that need to be made?
It is right, but people should be aware that both, I mean, I have no idea about Canada, but definitely in European countries, you have a part of the taxes which are paid by the employer and a part of the taxes which are paid by the employee. And the share which is paid by the employer is very significant. So actually, in the case of Spain, we're talking about 30% approximately. And this has been, I mean, this is, let's say, a point of where people struggle sometimes. I mean, when you arrive here to Spain, you come with the European fellowships and you're thinking only in those amounts that you see on the table. If you do not keep in mind everything which will be removed, then you might have a nasty surprise when you get here. It's still a very, very decent amount of money. I mean, I can tell you that in the case of Spain, it's an extremely competitive postdoctoral salary. I mean, it's higher than any national program that we have. But just if you want to see an example in collaboration with EURAXESS Spain, in our EURAXESS Spain portal, we have just published about a month ago a guide kind of explaining on a postdoctoral fellowship how this is transformed into a salary in Spain in general terms, because then you have to remember that. For example, in Spain, we have autonomous communities, and depending on the kind of institutions, some percentages might change. So it's not a one piece fits all, but it gives a very good example or a very good view of that big amount of money exactly what it means as monthly salary at the end of the day. So it's an exercise that I invite anybody to do in order to avoid nasty surprises. But again, I mean, Marie Curie definitely all across Europe is an extremely competitive salary, even regardless of all these deductions and so on.
I've just found this guide as you've been mentioning that, and I shared a link in the chat, so I'll be also disseminating this afterwards. Do you mind reiterating, and perhaps, especially if there's a difference between the European Fellowship and the Global Fellowship, which payments are direct? Do they go through the European institution, to the global institution? Does it depend on the country?
I mean, the starting point is that the beneficiary makes a contract and pays the salary, both in the European Fellowship, of course, and in the Global Fellowship. Nevertheless, the Global Fellowship, the program itself, allows for the possibility that the host institution in Europe, the beneficiary, sends the money to the outgoing associated partner in order to have also a contract there. They keep a contract in the European country, they have a contract outside. And I say that the program allows for this because, again, from the side of Spain, I've known about this being a proposal because Switzerland has been a third country up until this year. So Switzerland, for the benefit of the fellows, recommended to get the money so they could make a second contract because they have higher social security coverage. They would also allow to increase the salary with additional funding from the Swiss organization. So it was all for the benefit of the fellow. But unfortunately, Spanish institutions, to the best of my knowledge, didn't find a legal way to actually do this. So the program allows for this, but again, this is the kind of thing that maybe you want to keep in mind before starting to write the proposal.
Thank you. I'm going to mark that as answered. And I'll invite you if there's some questions you see that.
Yeah, I saw maybe to try at least to tackle one or two or three regarding the non-academic sector. So I mentioned that intersectorality is expected to be in any proposal. I mean, it may not be there, but then you might lose some of those key points that you need in order to get the funding. So you can include secondments during a normal duration of a project is a nice way or a nice tool in order to put their intersectorality, and you can put it in order to complete your profile as a researcher, in order to make, looking for that employability and so on. So you're thinking that you could put it as a kind of secondment. So, but it's only a possibility. I mean, it's, let's say, one of the traditional ways. And this is opposed to the non-academic placement. The non-academic placement is an additional thing which needs to take place in a non-academic sector, yes or yes, at the end of the project, if it makes sense. So somebody was asking about an example of a non-academic placement. Well, if you're doing any kind of research, which you think you will get to some kind of prototype, which could eventually be put out in the market, then you might want to propose a non-academic placement with a company which might help you try to put that prototype in the market. That's a very simple way of thinking of it. And I wanted to tackle this question because non-academic placements are nice, and it's something that are put there because the European Union as a whole wants to boost this intersectoral collaboration. But I mean, you should not, let me put it that, if you do not put a non-academic placement in your proposal, it's perfectly fine. It will not it will not remove points from you. But if you put a weak non-academic placement in a proposal, you will be losing points. So put it there if it makes sense. But again, differentiate. Even if you don't have an academic placement, ideally you should have some kind of intersectorality across your normal project, and this can be done through the secondment.
Thank you. For tying back to your earlier comments about the residency requirements and not having lived in the country for more than 12 months in the last 36 months, were you saying this applies only to the global stage or the outgoing phase of the global fellowship? In this case, we've just received a question about a European who did PhD in Germany and is within a couple days in either direction here. But this would be someone who's doing if I'm reading the question correctly, and feel free to update it to the asker, this would be someone who wants to do the European fellowship, coming back to Europe from abroad, doing a 1 to 2 year European fellowship, but who's going back to Germany, who's already been in Germany for 12 months in the last 36 by the call deadline.
Okay.
I guess I'll let you read it, but the big question here is for a European who would be going back to a country they've lived more than 12 months in the last 36, can they do the European fellowship with no residency requirements?
No, I mean this person I think would not meet the mobility criteria. So the mobility criteria says that you have to look into 36 months back from the call deadline. So 10th of September of 2022. And along those 36 months, make sure that if you want to go to Germany, you haven't spent more than 12 months in Germany along those 36 months. And I believe that if I'm not mistaken, if we put together the few months that you have from the time of the PhD, plus the time that this person has already been in Germany, I think he or she would not be eligible for a European fellowship in Germany. He or she wouldn't have any problem, for example, in a global fellowship, because I said that's very late, but this mobility criteria in the global fellowship is measured in the outgoing country. So if a global fellowship makes sense to this person, he or she could go to the German institution and doing the outgoing phase in, I don't know, US, Asia, whatever, Japan, and the mobility rule would be measured in that third country, not in Germany.
Got it. Thank you. Going to go through some of these pending questions. Someone asked about, well, actually, I do want to just one question. Someone asked about additional opportunities outside of the postdoctoral fellowship. For the many attendees who are joining from Canada, I'll say that for staff exchanges, you do have 2 schemes that you can apply to through MyTax. So for those who are in Canada, interested on whether you're research or administrative staff, looking to be funded to go to Europe for short-term staff exchanges between 1 and 12 months, MyTax may have some 2 programs of interest to you. And then in that same sense, the EU will pay for staff exchanges to Canada or to any other country in the world, but again, from Europe. So in a lot of ways, there's schemes outside of the postdoctoral fellowship where institutions outside of Europe can benefit, perhaps indirectly because their partners in Europe will get some funding for mobility or for exchanges. So I would encourage those looking into the staff exchanges of MSCA, which we didn't really touch very much, I'll send some information on MyTax, MITACS. I think most in Canada will know it well, and you can look into those schemes. So hopefully I've addressed that. And I've also elaborated a little bit on how Canada is associated to Pillar 2, but not to Pillar 1. So that means Canadians, you are now eligible for funding on the same basis as your European counterparts for collaborative consortium, excuse me.
So you want me to try to address some of the other questions in the list, or?
Anything you see that I think we can wrap up?
Yeah, because some of them I think you've realized that I can talk a lot. Sometimes I talk more than I should, but but I can make them quick, some of them. So the one about graduating next year, just to highlight that postdoctoral fellowships, you need to have a PhD and you need to have a PhD degree at the date of the call deadline. Any requirements from host institutions in terms of application package, institution letter? This is a very good point, because for global fellowships, it was in my slide, although I didn't mention it specifically, I believe. In the applications of the global fellowships, you are expected, at least until last year. This could change in this one because we haven't seen the rules. I would expect that it's going to be the same because, as I said, it's a very stable program. There are very little changes from one year to the other. But as of 2024, last year, it was still necessary to include a letter of commitment from the associated country of your outgoing phase. Okay, so that's an important point. Are there ERA fellowships equivalent for global fellowships? I'm afraid not, because ERA fellowships are precisely to boost those widening countries. So a global fellowship would somehow lose a little bit the idea. Restrictions of nationality, I think it's been, the long-term residence. I think it's in the guide for applicants, you have the explanation, and the way that it's written is that you need to, the important thing is in the consecutive years. So you need to have been 6 consecutive years in Europe. Europe meaning what Jackson was explaining about EU member states or associated countries to Horizon Europe. So, and that can be in different countries, but it has to be continuous. 6 years, and we have always been indicated by the European Commission that this status, you don't lose it. You would have to apply some kind of document that will show you that for those 6 years you've been working there. Could be working contracts, it could be rental of apartments, quite a number of, there are no specific documents. What else? Can secondment period take place at the beginning of the fellowship? Yes, they can take place in any moment, and it's important to highlight also in the case of global fellowships. For example, if somebody, especially if you're a European who's going to Canada, I'm thinking about those visa requirements or any kind of things that they need to keep in mind in terms of taxes. You have the possibility of actually starting with a secondment in your European host institution. So imagine somebody working in the Spanish Research Council as the European host and going to Western University in Canada. This person could start with up to 3 months secondment in Spain, which allows you sort of to put together your project, do any kind of visa arrangements and so on. And that you would start with a secondment and then you go to Canada. And all of it would be counting as the outgoing phase. And secondments can take place in any country? Absolutely, yes. And I'm not sure what this question means. What is needed in the institutional tables?
I think we'd have to dig into the timing of what slide was up when this was asked. So I'll invite the person who asked to maybe elaborate. And if we don't see anything else, I think if you have any closing remarks, Xavi, before Daria wraps up, and Mihaela might give some closing thoughts as well. I'll just finish my job moderating the Q&A to say that you will be getting a post-event survey. Should take about 30 seconds of your time. So thank you for sharing any thoughts. And again, anyone who is registered for this, whether they showed up or not, they will get a follow-up email from Zoom tomorrow with, if everything's ready in time, we'll have the recording as well as the slides from all of the speakers. So Xavi, I turn it to you, and then from there, our remaining speakers, I think we'll close it out for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would highlight pay attention to the presentation of FIBOs, as I said at the beginning. I mean, those are the people who know what to do it. And then the rules of applications, you have it in my very long and horrible presentation. And please contact us NCPs if you need any help. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is that you should try to contact the NCP of the country where you want to go. And that's it.
Thank you, Xavi. And Mihaela, would you like to also say something before we wrap up?
Just to thank you all for participating, and thank you for organizing and for presenting. And also remember that we're here to support your adventure, and good luck with your applications.
Thank you so much. From the very beginning till now, I think you supported us. Excellent. I mean, thank you so much. So with that, I think we can wrap up today's event. Xavi, I can say that you provided a lot of information, and the presentation that we are going to share with the participants, I think they will just come back and look and for many details. But I think what I can also add is that they really need to look at the websites and the updates. I think it is a kind of must, and otherwise they can lose some of the very important parts. And as you said, NCPs are great sources that before they apply from the very beginning till the end. So thank you so much for your availability for all these applicants from all over the world. This is the very challenging part, I think, right? Okay, so thank you so much. So I just want to remind that we are going to share the recording of this webinar and also the presentations on our website, also in our YouTube channel. So they can just reach out to all of these and previous events as well. And I also want to encourage you to visit the EURAXESS portal and follow the social media channels that we shared with you during the event. Thank you, Jackson. You shared all the links, also not only about EURAXESS, but also MSCA. So I want to thank again to all our speakers for their great support and collaboration, and of course to our audience. But I just want to end up my remarks saying that we are going to organize some info session in May and June. So just follow us, because I think these days we need more support and information about these projects and grants. So thank you again, and we hope to see you next month.